Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Dave. Let's close the door here. Before I get started, last night, Simon Ferguson mentioned that if Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have a baby, that baby could be President of the United States. So it made me think, because a couple of weeks ago, my wife and I were lucky enough to go and see Hamilton in London, and there's a somewhat cheeky portrayal of, King George in that show. So I pinged a note last night to Lin-Manuel Miranda saying, you know what, I've had a great idea. Hamilton 2, the sequel, The King Returns. And if Meghan and Harry get on with it, it could happen in the next couple of decades. So we could be back, the Brits. I also wanted to start by saying a few words about Dave Hilfman, our Master of Ceremonies. And I had this slide put together to recognise his great achievements at United Airlines. I think the plane is slightly off course, to be honest with you. I'm not entirely sure that it should be flying where it is, and I hope that's not how United is going to be without you, Dave. I'm sure it's not, but he is a fantastic human being. I've been in this industry now for 29 years, and I think virtually all of them I've worked and interfaced with Dave, who is a thoroughly decent, honest, hard-working and fun person to do business with. He, however, has never in his life upgraded me, so I'm not sure all these people you were given, passes to, and we must talk about that. The other thing about Dave is, and I was thinking the other day that, as some of you may know, he is going to get married at the end of the year, which is rather nice. And it got me to thinking about his intended spouse, and she comes from Australia. So I started to think, well, what other good things have come out of Australia? And I was, drumming my fingers, and I went online last night to check. And apart from, obviously, our own payments business, Keynote, which comes from Australia, the other great things Australia have given us have been more deadly things to kill you, like spiders, sharks, and snakes, than anywhere else on the planet. They did give us what's called the Hills Hoist, which is a rotating thing to put clothes on, a clothesline. They gave us Vegemite, which I'm sure some of you have tasted and know is disgusting. They gave us Rupert Murdoch, which is also an acquired taste. And they gave us the robot sheep shearer. So, Dave, I think you've got the best of Australia in your lovely spouse-to-be. So, folks, on to the serious bit of the day, and the theme of my remarks today is really about progress, which is defined as forward or onward momentum towards a final destination. Because you know what, it's quite easy in our industry to have a lot of negativity bandied around. And yet, across the technology that's being deployed for corporate travel and distribution, there's actually quite a great deal of progress going on as we speak. Progress that's been made, progress that's being made, and more definitely to come. And so I want to talk a little bit today about some of the major forces at play in the industry, from NDC to changing consumer behavior and mobile, to the influence of AI and big data, and to the use of intelligent robots in the service of our industry. And really, I intend to do some of this to sort of tee up the rest of the meeting over the next couple of days. Let me start, however, at a macro level and consider overall progress in the travel and tourism industry. I have the privilege of serving on the executive committee of the World Travel and Tourism Council, and our most recent figures show that in 2017, the global travel and tourism sector accounted for fully 10.4% of global GDP, and it employs 313 million of the world's citizens in the sector. That 1 in 10 of the world's jobs are in our industry is in itself remarkable. What's even more remarkable is that we believe at the WTTC that 1 in 5 of all new jobs created in 2017 were in the travel and tourism sector. And relative to most, if not all industries, our sector employs proportionally more younger people, and from a race, gender, and LGBTQ mix within it, although there's still much need for improvement at senior levels, it's at the higher end of the diversity scale. And this is the reason that governments around the world should really pay full attention to our sector, and that's one of the key missions of the WTTC. And in some of the major economies around the world, such as Japan and my home country, the United Kingdom, which at least for now is up there as one of the major economies in the world. We'll see how we go after our disastrous exit from the EU through Brexit. But travellers and tourism growth in the United Kingdom was over 2.5 times higher than the overall GDP growth in the country. So, at least with Brexit coming, you can rest assured the pound will go down the toilet, so we'll become very cheap. And I do encourage you, post-Brexit, to come and spend your dollars with us, because we're going to need every bit of help we can get. So, let me now turn to our industry and the progress being made in it from a technology perspective, starting with the most topical item, which is IATA's NDC connectivity programme. Now, those who've been around for a while know this really began back in 2011, so about 7 years ago, when IATA published a white paper under its theme of simplifying the business, in which it began to talk about new standards required to convey the changing way in which airlines wanted to present and distribute their products and services. And indeed, when promoting the IATA NDC in 2012, IATA's then Director General, Tony Tyler, bravely compared it to the impact of the iPhone. Specifically, IATA outlined 3 key limitations which still have primacy on their website today, which they believe inhibit airline growth through third-party distribution technology. And these 3 were the ones on the slide here. First of all, they claimed a lack of product differentiation, enabled by, in particular, the GDSs, such that airlines could not sell their full value proposition. They called out the slow time to market, whereby they couldn't get their new content or products distributed through the third-party channel. And thirdly, they talked about their need and their desire, which was inhibited, to personalise offers in the indirect channel to individual consumers based on features such as frequent flyer status or personalised offers to individual corporations or even to individual travel agencies. So given the theme of progress today, how much has actually been made in addressing these limitations? So let me look at the first in terms of lack of product differentiation. So back in 2012, the airlines, you know what, they had a point. This is how GDSs would show the entire product range of an airline to consumers via a travel agency. And Mr. Tyler told executives in 2012 that at the end of the day, the travel agency sees only codes, F, J, Y, and their various derivatives, and there's no way to tell if your J product is a flatbed or if you've got an economy class seat which has an empty seat beside it or whatever. And he was absolutely right. So we still have green screen and still a lot of agencies, use that. But if you fast forward to today, there's been a quantum change. And all the GDSs, in some form or other, are now capable of showing much more than alpha booking class codes and numeric availability. Since initial launch in 2013, our own merchandising, rich content and branding has enabled airlines not only to show graphically and with descriptions their full fares, families and product ranges, but also ancillary products, bags, seats, Wi-Fi, pre-ordered meals, and so on. And today, 270 airlines offering 322 types of ancillaries are fully enabled with this kind of capability. The second was speed to market in the indirect channel versus the airline's own direct selling capabilities. And again, this very much used to be true. I've been around long enough to remember how painful it was when when airlines first introduced premium economy, the separate booking class for that. That was a real pain. And then you had people like Air New Zealand with their Sky Couch, where you can buy 3 seats together and sort of flatten them down for 2 people. That was a nightmare back in the day for us to implement. But since 2012, things have improved markedly. So I'll give you the example of 2015, when Delta introduced their existing range of fares families, basic economy, economy comfort, and so on. The minute those products went live on Delta's direct website, they were available to all the travel agencies using the GDS, all fully bookable. It's also claimed in the industry that there's a limitation, which is an ATPCO limitation of 26 booking classes, which therefore stymies apparently the airline's ability to sell a wider range of products. Well, today, ATPCO is able to generate a double-digit booking codes, which means we've gone from 26 to a potential of 676, 26 times 26. I cannot speak for all, but actually there are very few airlines who are actually capable themselves of dealing with these double-digit alpha booking codes, which is the truth of the matter. Some do, but they mainly use them for kind of flight redemption booking classes. And that's the fact. The fact is that most airline reservation systems can't handle double-digit booking codes. But don't worry, because the airlines have been resourceful with us and have found ways around this. So let me give you an example of this, showing you London to New York. Now, between London and New York on any given day, there are 34 flights operated by 8 carriers with direct service. So I'm excluding going via Iceland or going via Ireland or whatever. This is just direct services, London to New York. That becomes 64 flights a day when you add the code share partners. Now, that's Now, some of those partners only have 26 booking classes, but other airlines, like American Airlines and British Airways in particular, have over 130 price points in our system on each flight from London to New York and back again. Now, to give you an idea of scale, that means London, New York alone, there are 3,368 different price points, and for those price points, there are 23,500 different attributes. Attributes being carry-on bag, checked bag, seat selection, changes, refunds, meals, Wi-Fi, and so on. So you can see this is actually pretty complicated in terms of size and scale, in terms of addressing how we show all of this content in a means that can be consumed and used either by a TMC or a corporate booking tool, or indeed, by an online travel agency. So we're not fully there yet, but there's an awful lot of work that's been done to improve how we can actually enable a much broader range of content for airlines and enable their merchandising. The third piece was personalization. The third objection or reason for NDC was personalization. And this was the criticism that third-party intermediaries don't allow airlines to tailor their offers according to who's asking. Now, again, there is more to be done here for sure, but let's just take stock as to where we are today. The largest element of personalization that still exists is different fares. Be they dynamic discounts from published fares, or be they flat fares negotiated by agencies that then mark up for corporations, or be they fares related to special personas like military, government, or marine fares. All of this complexity today is actually managed effectively by the distribution platforms. And similarly, at least for years in the platform, at least on mine, I think it's pretty sure it's the same for Amadeus and Sabre, we can send frequent flyer data at the point of request to an airline on an interactive basis so they can decide what they want to offer a particular seat to a traveller because of the status they've got with that airline. That is already in place. And to these personalization capabilities at that level, we have added the ability to do personalized offers to corporations, not to the individual traveller, but to the people who work for that corporation. So this is an example of that, which obviously for confidentiality reasons I've mocked up because I can't show you a real one. But basically, if you had a deal with a Cayman bank and you said to the employees of that bank, not only do they get a special fare, but also they get access to the lounge no matter which booking class they're actually booked in, they get extra frequent flyer points, whatever, all of that can be relayed, through the TMC today, through the screens that are available to them. So huge progress has indeed been made. But what hasn't yet been made is massive progress on anybody's part to truly personalise offers down to individual traveller outside of the frequent flyer scheme. But let's put some context around this. And again, Dave, your CEO, Scott Kirby, at both American and at United, made some interesting comments. He said to investors recently that 85% of United's passengers fly less than once a year. When he was at American, he said that 87% of American passengers fly less than once a year. And yet they represent about half the airline's revenue. Now, I'm telling you all in this room, for somebody who doesn't fly any more than once a year maximum, you don't get a personalised offer. And you never will. What you'll get is you'll get the same offer that's made to anybody else who is flying on that day, on that route, from that city, and paying in that currency. You'll get the same offer that anybody else has. And that is all available already today. So there's a long way to go before there's truly personalised offers coming out of all the work the airlines are doing in their systems to actually give somebody, person A, something completely different from person B, based on a set of criteria other than you're flying on that day, on that route, in that currency, on that city pair. And I think that's something that's very important to recognise and realise as we go through the changes that are being made in the industry. So my point that I'm making here is I'm not complacent by any stretch of the imagination. What I'm trying to point out is that in some of the key issues that IATA pointed out as being the reason for NDC, speed to market, merchandise content, personalisation, a great deal of progress has been made since 2011, 2012 across the industry. And that may indeed be why some of the predictions that were made back in 2012, notably by Henry Hartfeld, who in 2012, in a report admittedly commissioned by IATA, said that by 2017, the GDS share of airline business would drop to 7% from 60%. That hasn't happened. And it hasn't happened because there's been progress. People have invested, they have changed, they've moved. And we're making a lot of changes in the industry. And if you look at the industry bookings that go through GDSs as a whole, they've actually increased over this period, partly because low-cost airlines have come into the GDSs to get to distribution, particularly in the corporate marketplace, but also because of some major economies around the world like India, which is now the second biggest market for GDS air bookings after America. So it's usurped Germany in terms of size and scale. So at this point, I can't resist, this quote from Vanessa, who basically said that an economist is an expert who will know tomorrow why the things we predicted yesterday didn't happen today. And for economists, by the way, feel free to insert commentator, industry expert, beat journalist, or indeed distribution platform CEO. So I'm now going to switch to the progress that is still to come, because there is much work to do. Now, IATA has a leaderboard of airlines whose stated goal is to transact 20% of their entire indirect bookings via their NDC APIs by the end of 2020. And this is fluid because the rather catchy 2020 became 2020 because Qantas joined. So, the kind of strapline has gone a bit awry, but never mind. Now, for this goal to become a reality, considerable additional progress is going to have to occur over the next couple of years. And the good news is there are 12 technology companies, including the 3 major GDS platforms, who have what is known as Level 3 certification now as aggregators, the highest level. But these are the things that we've now got to start trying to address as an industry to go forward. The first one, and the news, is that no one is yet up and running at anything like the sort of scale with NDC APIs to able to ascertain how well and how fast these APIs will operate when they are being hit by the level of transactional activity that GDSs process. And this is a very important point we need to sort of prove out and work on. My own platform processes 6 billion itineraries a day, i.e. we price 6 billion itineraries a day. Remember, London to New York alone, there are 64 direct daily flights, there are over 3,300 price points, 25,000 attributes or whatever. And we check availability and price those options, and we filter it through travel policy, preference, desired attributes such as ticket flexibility, departure arrival time, and so on. And the distribution platforms do all of that work largely in our own systems. Now, the average speed of search in our system today in Travelport is less than 2 seconds. And in fact, a substantial minority of our searches, about 38% today, come back in less than 1 second. And today, interestingly enough, as a side point, 47% of the searches in our system are for branded fare shop. Now, if you contrast this 2 seconds with what we're seeing in the work we're doing with airlines today through their NDC APIs, we're seeing response times from the airlines of 5 seconds or more coming back. So again, if you go back to sort of trying to sort of price a London itinerary, all the options that are available, going out to 8 airlines ostensibly through APIs, waiting for 5, 6, 7, 8 seconds for them to come back, then having to sort of put all that content together and rationalize it and send it out, there's a big issue to resolve, in terms of how fast that can be delivered. And you think again about the people who are consuming that content, who increasingly are consumers through mobile apps, and the level of tolerance for lack of speed is extraordinarily low. And that's because what we're doing is quite complicated. It's not single carrier style itineraries. So we have to decide as an industry, what are we going to do? Are we going to wait for the slowest guy to come back and then send the data? Are we going to stream the data? And how does that work from a consumer perspective? I get some information back from the fastest airline, then, somebody else has popped in, for me to look at. How do we do that? And these kind of considerations are the things that we are working through in cooperation with our airline partners, but are not yet fully resolved. We are about, as Travelport, to launch later this month in Europe the first, production version of an NDC API capability with one of the European carriers, in fact, a number of the European carriers. And this will be exciting because this will be the first time we and they will really be able to stress test how this kind of technology works in a heavy-duty professional travel agency environment. So there'll be lots of learnings coming from it. We're under no illusion this is the end game product. This is the first iteration of product whereby all the learnings, at scale will be built into the next iteration coming through. Now, the other thing that I think is important is about standards. I'm not here talking about schemas because the IATA NDC schemas are generally speaking now version 17.2 and above being adopted. But the truth of the matter is, if you go behind the schema, which is meant to be a standard, there are huge variances in terms of how airlines interpret the schemas. And forgive me if I go a bit nerdy here, but I need to sort of, describe this to you because it is challenge for how we can bring on, as an industry, enough airlines, enough airline content at scale, to meet the demand and to get to the 2020 vision that IATA has. So, while some airlines under IATA NDC API provide mini fare rules in the search phase, others provide it at the price request stage. Some airlines have adopted what they call the inventory guarantee API into the schema. What that basically means is if I give you an offer back, I will guarantee that offer for a certain period of time so you can book it, which is pretty important when you're operating as a travel agency. Now, some airlines only guarantee that inventory at the time of request. Others only guarantee it at the time of ticketing. And so it varies according to different airlines. And today, within the IATA NDC API framework, only 9% of the airlines have adopted the inventory guarantee time limit element. So the schema is the same, but how it's being interpreted and used further down is markedly different. And this means that standard is actually a very loose term. And it also means, which is the most important point, that cost to serve, cost to service, and to manage content in a normalized environment is high due to complexity and lack of consistency. So the idea, the concept that, if everybody's on the same schema and same standard, you can write, once you've written to one, you can get to everybody, that is a fallacy as it exists today. And it's a concern for IATA, it's a concern for the airlines, and it's a concern for the technology companies like ours who are trying to make head or tail of it. And if you think about how this mushrooms out again in terms of servicing, so imagine you have a multi-carrier itinerary that you've sold for your customer. Some of that content for certain airlines has come through IATA NDC API. Other contents come from ATP code because the particular carrier doesn't yet have IATA NDC API. And now God help you if the customer wants to make a change. How do you service all of that and synchronize it all? Or one of the airlines in the itineraries makes a change, a schedule change or whatever. The things that happen day in, day out, which today are pretty efficiently dealt with in the industry, there's a level of complexity which is emerging, which we've got to find, solutions to. And I'm not saying we don't want to, and we're not going to work hard to do so, but I'm just trying to set the stage as to where further progress needs to be made. To give an example, in Travelport today, last year we made 900 changes in our system because of airline changes that were made. This could be anything from them implementing new e-ticketing capabilities, new interline capabilities, or all the way to them changing their host inventory provider. And the change dynamic in the NDC API in terms of how things, so they're not going to stand still, they're going to change all the time, and how those changes are made and how they are synchronized is actually a major source of concern and work for us to do. But you have to get started, which is what we're doing. You have to experience this in real life, and then you have to iterate through as you go on. And if you doubt what I'm saying, I invite you to go and look on the IATA AirTech Zone forum, which is on their website, to get an idea of the kind of complexity of the issues that are being grappled with. I have no doubt that we'll continue to make progress, but speed, cost to serve, and addressing increased complexity are all areas that are of very key concern and focus. Now, in my earlier remarks, I talked about IATA having 3 key areas that they thought were deficient, in terms of how distribution worked back in 2011, 2012, which were the merchandising, speed to market, and the personalization. To this, however, I think, in all honesty, there are 2 other unstated areas of concern or issue that IATA is really trying to address on behalf of its airlines. And these are the following: their control and their commercial models. And let me deal with each in turn. So control first. Right now, all the data that the airlines supply, such as the creation of the airline offer, meaning the routing and the fare, is largely done, the creation of the offer is largely done today by the distribution platforms, using fares and rules data supplied by ATPco and some other sources. And in general, this works well, and it certainly addresses the need for speed that I mentioned earlier. But it's also true that over the years, the GDSs, in responsiveness to their customers looking for lowest fares and other price points, and indeed people like Google ITA, have done an awful lot of work through algorithms and other searches to really deconstruct airline fares rules and reconstruct them to offer a fuller range of price points. In all frankness, the airlines don't like this. They're perfectly legitimate because they're according to the airline's own rules filed for their fares. But what happens is that there are often price points which can be routing over a particular airport, which is not the preferred hub point of the airline, because there's a lower price point when you do that by deconstructing the fare. And one of the things the airlines, I think, would like to do, and again, it's not for me to say if they're right or wrong, is they want to stop that because they want to sort of, have you come to them and ask for an offer, and they will therefore give you an offer which, dictates that you go through preferred hub airports that they have or preferred routings that they have, rather than being able to sort of construct a fare legitimately using their own rules. And there's a lot of progress that needs to be made here, as well as progress on how the airlines have better control of how their product is racked and displayed through the various screens that either travel agencies, online, offline, or TMCs, or indeed mobile booking tools show the content. So let me talk about some of the dynamics that are at work there. So one of the things you'll hear about a lot is airlines increasingly talk about dynamic pricing. What this means is that rather than file a fare and publish it and then it goes into the database of the GDSs, they want to dynamically construct a price as they go through. And it's making sure that the creativity in terms of what price point is offered is back with the airline and not with the third-party distributors or indeed the travel agencies. And we're seeing some first signs here of this happening. British Airways, for example, has introduced what are called SHAPS fares. These are short-haul additional price point fares. This is whereby BA has a little dynamic pricing engine they've created, and they offer, instead of a bucket which moves from the first fares at 100, the next price up is in the next booking class, which is 120. They now go 100, 101, 102, 103, 104, whatever, as they like. And they've basically moved themselves up from 10 price points in economy to 40 price points in economy, dynamically priced. And I think, by the way, it's perfectly legitimate for airlines, to do this. Because if I was an airline, that's what I would want to do. I'd want to sort of, be able to sort of tailor my offer, particularly if I'm competing with low-cost airlines who have much more dynamic pricing in terms of how they operate. I would want to do that also. But it is considerable change in terms of how offers are made and price points are reached for the airlines. The second point is, for want of a better word, shelves. And this is a mock-up slide. But basically, airlines clearly and legitimately want to improve the way that their product is shown on the shelves, which are offered by the TMCs, by the corporate booking tools, and indeed by online travel agencies. And this is something we're working very actively with a number of our friends in the industry on to make changes. Indeed, with Delta, very soon, we'll deliver at least one or two upsell opportunities on every response we give back through our APIs, so that people consuming our APIs, corporate booking tools and online agencies, will be able to show not just the lowest price, but also the next couple of price points up based on the fares, families, or whatever the airline has. And this is a big change, because again, you think about the kind of processing you have to do that, how you display it, how do you fit all that information on a screen, which makes sense and isn't a complete load of gobbledygook, for the person trying to interpret the offer, is a major challenge. But these are the areas that we are now, showing more progress on in terms of changing the way that we deliver content. And maybe the most controversial or fifth challenge, I think, of IATA is, without a doubt, changing and testing different commercial offers. And so let's have a look at what's been going on in the industry in the last couple of years, and I call this sticks and carrots. So in terms of carrots that are going on, a handful of airlines are basically offering what used to be called commission on NDC price tickets, so a carrot to use NDC. Others are offering more frequent flyer points if a booking is made through NDC. In many ways, I would say the private channel which is out there, which, by the way, is absolutely all GDS driven, but it's a carrot because it's an incentive for the airline to change the relationship with the agency by causing the agency to not take rebates from GDSs, lower GDS fees back to the airlines, but they're being remunerated in other ways. It's a carrot to sort of change the economic model in the industry. Against that, you've also then got sticks, whereby certain airlines, Europe in particular, 3 of them, have put surcharges on the GDS channel as a means to sort of drive people, force people into their API or portal offerings. And surcharges are progressively being ratcheted up. The other thing progressively now is content. We've got at least one major European carrier who is taking out some of the lowest booking classes out of the GDSs, again, to try and force, in their home dominant markets, the use of their APIs. And then things like SHAP fares, I would put them somewhere in the middle, because to give BA their due, they're offering something different, i.e. these different price points, different kind of product, but they are making it only available through an NDC API, at least at the moment. Now, How all this goes in terms of how regulators in a GDPR world see some of the things that are going on in the industry and how regulators see competition is really not an issue that I can comment on today. I could spend all day talking about it. But it is something which is driving change, in the industry. And how it plays out and where the money flows go, ultimately, remains to be seen. It's not an area where today there is any conclusive accommodation that's been reached across the industry, but you can rest assured the money flows are going to change. And that needs to happen if this goal of 2020 or 21-2020 is going to be achieved. So will we get there? Well, I'm mindful of the words of Lao Tzu, who's a 6th century BC Chinese poet, who said, "Those who have knowledge don't predict, those who predict don't have knowledge." So I'm making no predictions at this stage. So let me progress from IATA NDC, because it's not the only thing that's happening in the world of technology and travel, and talk about some other key areas of progress that's been made and is being made around these key themes of improvements in technology broadly, in terms of mobile, AI, data analytics, and robotics. I don't have time today to talk about blockchain or whatever as well, but that's another key aspect of change. And this is all requiring significant investments in the industry. Modernising platforms, particularly platforms, the scale and complexity of the GDS platforms, and delivering the content that our customers want with the speed and the accuracy that's required, requires significant investment. And the GDSs are, at different paces, moving quite fast forward in these areas. For example, cloud computing, which enables us to basically, reduce latency, improve speed by pushing data out to the edge of the network. In Travelport's case, we've deployed a hybrid cloud with Microsoft, for the mainstay of our GDS business. So what we do is the heavy-duty, more static content, rich content and branding, merchandising images, car and hotel images, etc., is pushed out to the edge of the network, whilst the transactional and change process is still done in our own data centers. So it's a hybrid, cloud model, which enables us to reduce, improve, I should say, speed. And that's essential in our world as we think about more and more travel going across mobile apps. Now, behind the curtain as well, the other things that the platforms are doing is changing the way they store data, moving to things like Docker, if you've heard of them, or more elastic and horizontal database capabilities, like you can get with MongoDB and Hadoop. I don't want to bore you with the technology of it, but what it really enables you to do is if you move some of your capabilities into these elastic databases, you can mine data much better in terms of predictive analysis, in terms of what consumers are going to do. You're not reduced to sort of looking at each individual P&R, opening it individually and then trying to interpret the data. You can go horizontally across all the data in the system, which in turn means that you can use better AI, artificial intelligence, to deliver a better service and a more tailored and relevant service to the requesting agency. It's all about propensity to buy, etc. And the interesting thing to me, if I come back to this point about a lot of passengers fly less than once a year on the big airlines, I may fly less than once a year on American, but as a consumer, I might fly 5 times a year on a combination of American, Frontier, United, Delta, or whatever. And the best entity to have that view of what that consumer does across all of that are GDSs, and through GDSs, the TMCs and the leisure agencies who service that customer. So that's a real area of growth and opportunity in terms of technology investment that's taking place. In terms of AI and machine learning, we're reducing the number of transactions that we send to supplier airlines. It's kind of a bizarre thing. NDC API is about send us more transactions. We're using AI and big data to send fewer transactions. And the reason why we're doing that, or how we're doing that, is basically we're looking at predicted decays in inventory counts, so we know better what to do full fat search on and what not to do full fat search on. Our anticipation as Travelport is through using AI and big data, we can reduce the number of times we hit the airline system by a range of 50 to 80%, which we're now putting in our modelling. That's real cost saving, in fact, for the airlines. And it's also delivering better service to your customers because you're getting much more relevant offers served up as opposed to unnecessary computing power and unnecessary space being taken up, offering options which never get bought, which is a waste of everybody's time. The second big leg of change is in mobile. Do you know it is now 10 years since the first airline mobile app went out, which was British Airways. It was not much of an app, to be honest with you, at the time. It was a clone of its website, and it was pretty limited in functionality. The first mobile travel booking began in 2010. Now, you fast forward that to today, and 40% of online travel commerce globally today is through mobile. And interesting enough, it's Southeast Asia who's at the apex of that. 50%, over 50% of Southeast Asia travel is booked on mobile devices today. Northern Europe is about 35%. And we've moved, obviously in terms of mobile apps now, which we all know about, to including boarding passes, passport scanning, wayfinding, find your way around the airport, etc., new forms of payment, baggage, and significant abilities for the app to interface with you. EasyJet just this last week, launched quite a nifty little capability with Instagram, whereby if a consumer on Instagram sees a picture of a place that they'd like to go to, you can just click on it, and it'll take you out to EasyJet, and it'll show you flights EasyJet offer you to that destination. Now that's fascinating, especially when you think about 70% of the content on Instagram is for travel. That's what people are sharing most, first and foremost in terms of their pictures or whatever. It's Instagram, and this is where some of the technology is now going. And to give you an example, and given we're in their hometown and the CEO of BCD is speaking tomorrow, I thought I'd show you what BCD are doing in terms of their TripSource Go in the corporate travel world and the capabilities, there. So this is the TripSource platform developed by BCD with our help, in fact, for our team based in Dublin, which includes things like the rich content and branding, the merchandising, so users can see baggage fees, seat maps, in-flight Wi-Fi capabilities, in-flight meals while shopping, and incorporating amenity data. So hotel and air booking are in place, car and other ground transportation is coming. But a large part of the whole mobile piece isn't just about basic book search content, it's about the customer experience all the way through. And that engage capability whereby you can tell the customer at the point that they're consuming travel, when they've landed, hey, listen, remember the policy is take a lift car, not a yellow taxi, because that's the company policy and it saves us £20 a journey. You can engage with that customer at the point they're about to consume that piece of the travel. What the BCD are now doing is including corporate customer branding, trip polls, integration with OBTs, and a whole culture based around usability. It's a step change difference in terms of where content is going. And if you don't think mobile isn't really where it's going to be at, I draw your attention yesterday to Hopper. I don't know if you know the Hopper app. Admittedly, it's a leisure app today, but they just raised $100 million of further investment, which would value their company at $780 million. And that is an example of where AI and mobile are coming together to deliver a different kind of customer experience. And could that same kind of thing be done in corporate travel? Absolutely. And I think you're beginning to see some of that coming through. And I would call out, because again, they're on the panel, to, I think it's today or tomorrow, where to. Now, they're using data in the corporate travel world to calculate the optimal range of prices and travel options based on the actual destination of the traveller, where the traveller's actually going to. I'm not actually going to Atlanta Airport, I'm actually coming to the Battery Park Centre, etc. So what's the best travel option for me to get to the destination that I'm going to? Companies can select a pre-configured algorithm, or they can actually have different algorithms, according to different departments in the company, or according to different individuals, in the company, according to their business. And a lot of this, change, I think, in the corporate booking world is basically corporate travel management in the moment, enabling, changes to be made, in real time as consumers consume the travel. This is a new product, but my understanding is that this product will be adopted by a Fortune 10 US company in the not-too-distant future. So again, the changing way that consumers will experience and will buy travel. The view that I expressed to Travelport people is that we're assuming that in the next 3 or 4 years, 70% of all of our transactions will originate from mobile. And in turn, 70% of that 70% will be untouched by a human being. And to get there, a significant amount of progress will be made in the area of robotics, led by AI, but implemented to perform the tasks that human beings spend a great deal of time doing in the travel world. Now, obviously, Isaac Asimov's view in 1942 was that a robot may not injure a human being through inaction to have harm. And 70 years ago, he made that statement. I'm pleased to say now I'm not sure a robot has caused anybody harm. Possible exception could be the robot sheep shear in Australia that I mentioned before. I think some sheep haven't seen the light of day as a result of that. And or the injured ego of Gary Kasparov when he lost against IBM's Deep Blue in 1977. But the most ubiquitous examples of this now are obviously the chatbot, and for some years now we've seen a device powered by IBM's human mimicking Watson computer deployed at the Hilton Hotel in McLean in Virginia. And robotics are only beginning to change the landscape in terms of the roles that human beings traditionally performed in travel. And although it's a prediction, and I don't particularly like predictions, Gartner estimates that by 2020, 20% of all companies will dedicate workers to monitor and guide neural networks. So let me try and give you some tangible instances in our industry where robotics are coming through. This is the kind of thing that we're doing. So we're trying to work out how we can reduce the manual overhead of service to a traveller. We're trying to improve the service to travellers, servicing their needs more quickly. And we're offering opportunities for greater revenue creation through the use of robotics. So this is a cloud-based eventing platform which we're launching into the marketplace today, which will be triggered by an event which an agency will determine, which will gear up a robotic application to provide a particular service. We interviewed 23 customers as we've gone through this process, and we estimate that on average we can save 12.5 hours a day of their time by roboticizing some of the things their consultants are doing. The idea is not to put people out of jobs. The idea is to free up those people to do more productive value-add servicing, but also to enable service to be delivered on a 24/7 by 365 basis, no matter where the consumer is, however they engage with you in real time. And it's not just in the front end of our business, in the back end of our business in travel, just to share with you, we're at the moment deploying robotics into our finance function. And our calculations with the robotics we're putting into finance, we can free up 20% of our non-productive person time in finance to actually deal with more value-add activity whilst the robots take care of it. So this is all happening very fast. And obviously, I couldn't speak today about changes without talking about data. And I know people talk about data as the new oil, and I think it's a somewhat tired and misleading cliche, because oil only has value due to its scarcity. The one thing you can say about data is there's no scarcity of it. On the contrary, in the next 2 years, the World Economic Forum predicts that 40 zettabytes of data will be created. Now, 40 zettabytes is a big number, but that's basically 4 million years of HD video or 5 billion US Libraries of Congress in terms of data. It is everywhere, and it's slushing around in clouds and in servers, often and mostly untouched. So granted, like drilling for oil, data only becomes really useful when you can liberate it and use it. And one of the leading exponents of data used globally is, of course, IBM. And as that company continues its transformation, its CEO, Ginny Rometty, reminded us earlier this year that 80% of the world's data, 80%, is not searchable on the web, and that we in our own companies have this data and can act on it. And Ginny talks about exponential data, which is the value of data not in its volume, but in its variety and the insights unearthed by the systems that aren't programmed, but by systems that learn. And it helps organizations learn exponentially. Now, this is all a bit self-serving for IBM because it's obviously about IBM's Watson's law, etc. But the concept of exponential data plus artificial intelligence to drive exponential learning is absolutely, key for where the industry, is going. And IBM is pioneering a lot of this, and this you'll hear, and I know people are sufficiently interested in this, that they voted to have Sean Busby come and speak about the IBM Trip Manager capability to see how a platform is using artificial intelligence, cognitive computing, predictive data analytics to enable what-if style scenarios tuned into the corporate travel world. So when Sean makes his presentation, that's kind of what he's going to be talking about. And I think this what you are beginning to see through the use of data will be in the moment and much more proactive corporate travel management, which I personally think is extremely exciting. So in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that this morning I've achieved my purpose to give some food for thought, and I have covered quite a lot of ground relatively quickly, and I didn't get to blockchain. But I hope that in the time this morning I've given you some, first of all, reassurance that there is a tremendous amount of progress that has been made, but there is a lot more to come. There are some very complicated areas which are not yet clear in terms of the way forward, especially around IATA NDC, but there's every reason to believe that if the industry pulls together more and on the basis that everybody's business will be improved and destinations for progress sought will be reached much faster if it does, then I think there are grounds for optimism. Only by continuing to make the kind of progress which I've been discussing with you today will we truly see servicing our customers and moving towards the destination we set for ourselves. Now, I'm not sure that I know what the final destination is. In fact, I'm sure that there isn't a final destination yet because there are so many changing forces. But as long as we continue to move forward in a respectable speed and momentum, and with the wherewithal to tack left or right as we learn more going through, it seems clear to me we're on the right path to be able to deliver something much better than we have today for the traveller and the various owners of the content that the traveller uses. So with the formidable speakers that the Beat have lined up here in Atlanta, I hope that some of the themes I've attempted to draw out today in my remarks will serve as a basis for further dialogue over the next couple of days. I wish you a great time here in Atlanta. I wish you a great time at the Beat Live conference. Thank you very much indeed.